dog regularly seen wandering near a hospital starts behaving strangely around the newborn ward. When staff investigate, they witness an act of compassion no one expected. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The morning fog rolled through the streets of San Francisco as Max, a large mixed-breed dog with matted fur and piercing amber eyes, made his way through the busy sidewalks. His movements were deliberate, almost purposeful, as he navigated through the morning crowd. Despite his unkempt appearance, there was something dignified about him that made people stop and stare. Some tried to approach him, but Max kept his distance, maintaining a steady pace as if he had somewhere specific to be. At San Francisco General Hospital, Nurse Jessica Chen pulled her dark hair into a tight bun as she prepared for her morning shift. The fluorescent lights of the locker room cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept well in weeks, not since the incident. The memory of that night haunted her. The emergency alarms, the rushed movements of the medical team, and ultimately, the devastating silence that followed when they couldn't save the newborn. Jessica walked through the quiet corridors toward the nursery wing, her footsteps echoing against the linoleum floors. The morning shift was usually her favorite, watching the sun rise while checking on the sleeping newborns, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. But lately, each visit to the nursery brought back memories of the baby she couldn't save. She paused at the observation window, watching the rows of clear bassinets. Each contained a swaddled infant, peaceful and unaware of the world around them. Her hand unconsciously moved to the silver pendant she wore, a gift from her mother when she first became a nurse. "To remind you of all the lives you'll touch," her mother had said. Now it felt heavy around her neck. In the doctor's lounge, Dr. Michael Roberts was engaged in a heated discussion with Dr. Thompson, one of the senior pediatricians. "I'm telling you, Dave, all these superstitions about death, omens, and guardian angels are just ways for people to cope with what they can't explain," Michael argued, stirring his coffee with more force than necessary. His white coat was pristine, his appearance as ordered as his logical mind. "Not everything in medicine can be explained by science, Michael," Dr. Thompson responded, his eyes crinkling with wisdom earned from decades of practice. "Sometimes faith plays a bigger role than we'd like to admit." Their conversation was interrupted when Jessica entered the lounge. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about her recent loss. It had been her first death in the nursery ward, and the impact was visible in her demeanor. The confident stride she once had was replaced by hesitant steps. Her usual warm smile now seemed forced. "Dr. Roberts, I have the updated charts for room 304, Jessica said, her voice professional but distant. She placed the files on the table, avoiding eye contact. Michael watched her with clinical detachment, but there was a flicker of concern in his expression. "Nurse Chen, about last week's incident," he began. "I've already submitted my report," Jessica cut him off, her tone making it clear she didn't want to discuss it further. "Everything is documented, according to protocol." The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Thompson cleared his throat and excused himself, leaving Michael and Jessica in uncomfortable silence. "You did everything you could," Michael finally said, his voice softer than usual. "Sometimes these things are beyond our control." Jessica's shoulders stiffened. "Is that what you tell yourself, Dr. Roberts? That it's just a matter of statistical probability?" Her voice cracked slightly. That baby had a name, parents who had decorated a nursery, dreams that will never be realized. Michael adjusted his glasses, a habit when he felt uncomfortable. "We're medical professionals, Nurse Chen. We can't let emotional attachment cloud our judgment." "Maybe that's the problem," Jessica responded, turning to leave. "We've forgotten that our patients are more than just cases in a file." As she walked away, neither of them noticed the large dog that had appeared outside the hospital's main entrance, his amber eyes fixed on the building with an almost human-like intensity. Max had arrived at his destination, and the lives of everyone in San Francisco General were about to change in ways none of them could predict. The first time Max appeared at the nursery entrance, it caused quite a stir among the hospital staff. The large dog sat perfectly still outside the glass doors, his eyes focused intently on the newborn ward. Security initially moved to shoo him away, but something about his calm demeanor made them hesitate. "That's the third time I've seen him this week," whispered Maria, one of the night shift nurses, to her colleague. "Always in the same spot, always around the same time." She peered at Max through the security cameras, noting how he maintained his vigilant position without causing any disturbance. The news of the mysterious dog spread quickly through the hospital staff. Some claimed they'd seen him wandering the hospital grounds late at night, while others swore he appeared just before critical situations in the nursery. A few of the maintenance workers had tried to approach him, but Max would simply stand up and walk away, only to return to his post hours later. Meanwhile, Jessica struggled through her shifts, the weight of her recent loss affecting every aspect of her work. During routine checks, her hands would shake slightly while taking vital signs. Each crying baby made her heart race, triggering memories of that fatal night. Nurse Chen called out Dr. Stevens, one of the resident physicians. "We need you in room 312. The mother is having trouble with feeding." Jessica nodded, gathering her supplies. As she walked to the room, she passed the wall of photos showing successful deliveries and happy families. Each smiling face seemed to mock her failure. She paused, catching her reflection in the glass. The confident nurse who had once proudly walked these halls was barely recognizable in the tired face that stared back at her. In room 312, she managed to maintain her professional demeanor while helping the new mother position her baby for feeding. "Remember to support the head." "There you go," she instructed, her voice steady despite the tremors in her hands. The baby latched successfully, and the mother's face lit up with relief. "Thank you," the mother said warmly. "I was so worried I was doing something wrong." Jessica forced a smile, but inside she felt hollow. Every successful interaction with a healthy baby reminded her of the one she couldn't save. "Just press the call button if you need anything else," she said, quickly excusing herself from the room. Dr. Michael Roberts noticed these changes in Jessica's behavior. Despite his skepticism about emotional involvement in patient care, he couldn't deny that her performance was suffering. He observed her from a distance, noting how she rushed through her rounds, minimizing contact with the babies and their families. One evening, while reviewing patient charts, Michael caught sight of Max through his office window. The dog's presence had become such a regular occurrence that most staff had stopped questioning it. But Michael's scientific mind couldn't accept the mysterious nature of the animal's appearances. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, setting down his papers. He grabbed his coat and headed outside, determined to investigate. The evening air was cool, and fog was rolling in from the bay as he approached Max. The dog watched him calmly, showing no sign of fear or aggression. As Michael got closer, he noticed details that weren't visible from a distance. Max's fur, though unkempt, showed signs of previous grooming. His eyes held an intelligence that made Michael uncomfortable. It felt too much like being evaluated by another conscious being. "Where did you come from?" Michael asked quietly, reaching out slowly. But before his hand could make contact, Max stood up and trotted away, disappearing around the corner of the building. Michael followed quickly, but when he turned the corner, the dog was gone. Confused and slightly frustrated, Michael returned to the hospital entrance. He found Jessica standing there, staring at the spot where Max had been sitting. "Did you see where he went?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Michael replied, his scientific mind struggling to explain the dog's sudden disappearance. "It's just a stray, probably looking for food." Jessica shook her head. "I don't think so. He never takes the food people leave out for him. He just watches." Their conversation was interrupted by the evening shift change announcement over the PA system. As they both turned to head back inside, neither noticed the pair of amber eyes watching from the shadows. nor could they predict how their lives would soon be intertwined with this mysterious guardian of the nursery. The storm hit San Francisco with unexpected force. Rain lashed against the hospital windows while thunder rattled the building's foundations. It was just past 2 a.m. when the emergency alert sounded through the nursery ward. Jessica was first to respond, running to ward room 215, where monitors were screaming their warning. Inside, a premature baby boy, born just hours earlier, was struggling to breathe, his tiny chest heaving with the effort. The baby's skin had taken on a bluish tint, and the oxygen saturation monitor showed dangerously low numbers. Code blue, nursery room 215. Jessica's voice echoed through the intercom system, her training taking over despite her fears. Her hands moved automatically, checking vital signs and positioning the baby while waiting for backup. Michael was in the on-call room when the alert came through. He sprinted down the corridor, his white coat flying behind him. The sound of his footsteps mixed with the storm's fury as he burst into the room, immediately assessing the situation. "What are his stats?" Michael demanded, pulling on latex gloves. "Oxygen at 82 and dropping," Jessica reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Heart rate 180, respiratory rate 70, and labored." The room quickly filled with medical personnel. Equipment was wheeled in, voices overlapped with urgent commands, and the baby's monitors continued their ominous beeping. Outside, lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes, followed by deafening thunderclaps. Starting respiratory support, Michael announced, his movements precise as he positioned the equipment. "Jessica, I need you too." A sharp bark cut through the chaos, causing several heads to turn. There, in the doorway, stood Max, his fur dripping wet from the storm. Nobody had seen him enter the building, yet here he was, his presence commanding attention even in the midst of the emergency. "Someone get that dog out of here," Michael shouted, turning back to his patient. But Max didn't move. Instead, he barked again, more insistently this time, his eyes fixed on the medical team. Jessica glanced between Max and the baby, noticing something in the dog's behavior. He wasn't just barking randomly. His attention seemed focused on the ventilation equipment they were using. "Dr. Roberts," Jessica said, her voice urgent. "The secondary oxygen line, it's kinked." Michael looked where she indicated and saw that she was right. The backup oxygen line had twisted under the equipment tray, potentially compromising the baby's air supply. He quickly corrected the issue, and within moments, the monitor showed improving oxygen levels. Max watched intently as the medical team continued their work. The baby's color slowly improved, and his breathing, while still labored, became more regular. The critical moment had passed, but the dog remained in his position, as if standing guard. Thunder crashed outside, and the hospital lights flickered ominously. The backup generators hummed to life, casting the room in a momentary dim glow before the main power stabilized. Through it all, Max's presence seemed to have a calming effect on both the staff and, remarkably, the infant, whose vital signs continued to improve. "I don't understand," one of the nurses whispered. "How did he know to come here? How did he even get in?" Jessica watched as Max finally sat down, his eyes never leaving the baby. She remembered all the stories circulating about his appearances, how he seemed to show up just when he was needed most. For the first time since losing her patient weeks ago, she felt something other than guilt and fear. She felt hope. Michael, however, was focused on stabilizing his patient. He worked methodically, checking and double-checking everything, refusing to acknowledge the strange circumstances that had just unfolded. But even he couldn't deny that without Max's intervention, they might have missed the oxygen line problem until it was too late. As the emergency subsided and the baby's condition stabilized, the extra personnel began to filter out of the room. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, a different kind of energy had taken hold. Something had shifted in the dynamic between the hospital staff, their patients, and their unexpected four-legged visitor. Max remained in his spot until the baby was completely stable, then stood up and shook his wet fur. He turned toward the door, but before leaving, he looked directly at Jessica, then at Michael, as if making sure they understood their responsibility to the tiny life they had just saved. Michael stood frozen for a moment, watching Max pad away from room 215. Something about the dog's deliberate movement broke through his scientific skepticism. Without fully understanding why, he found himself following Max down the dimly lit corridor. "Dr. Roberts, where are you going?" Jessica called after him, quickly checking the baby's vitals one last time before following. Max led them through the hospital's winding halls, his wet paw prints leaving a trail on the polished floors. He moved with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure they were still following. The storm's fury provided an ominous backdrop to their unusual procession. They arrived at the general nursery where several newborns were sleeping. Max stopped at one particular bassinet, raising himself on his hind legs to peer inside. The baby within, a day-old girl, according to her chart, appeared to be sleeping peacefully. "This is ridiculous," Michael muttered, moving to check the infant regardless. "We can't just follow a dog around the..." He stopped mid-sentence, his professional instincts kicking in as he noticed something subtle in the baby's breathing pattern. Jessica stepped closer, recognizing the slight retractions in the infant's chest wall, an early sign of respiratory distress that hadn't yet triggered any alarms. The baby's color was still good, but something wasn't quite right. "Get me a stethoscope," Michael ordered, already reaching for the nearby equipment cart. As Jessica handed him the instrument, other staff members began gathering round. Drawn by the unusual scene of their head pediatrician taking medical direction from a dog, Michael listened intently to the baby's chest, his expression growing more serious. "There's decreased breath sounds on the right side. We need to get her to NICU for assessment immediately." The team sprang into action, their earlier skepticism forgotten in the face of a potential emergency. As they prepared to transfer the infant, Max remained close, his attention fixed on the baby. His presence seemed to have a calming effect. The infant, despite her breathing difficulties, remained surprisingly quiet. "I don't believe this," Dr. Thompson whispered, having arrived to assist with the transfer. How did he know? The question hung in the air as they moved the baby to NICU. Further examination revealed a partially collapsed lung that, had it gone unnoticed longer, could have become a serious emergency. Thanks to the early detection, they were able to begin treatment before the condition worsened. Throughout the procedure, Max maintained his vigil outside the NICU window. Staff members passing by would pause to watch him, some leaving water bowls or bits of food that he politely ignored. His focus remained solely on the medical team working inside. Jessica found herself repeatedly glancing at Max as she assisted Michael with the procedure. The dog's behavior challenged everything she thought she knew about animal intelligence. More than that, his presence was somehow therapeutic. She felt more confident, more capable than she had in weeks. Michael, too, was affected by the evening's events, though he struggled to reconcile them with his rational worldview. He worked methodically to treat the infant, but his mind kept returning to the impossibility of what had just occurred. How had Max known? What had he sensed that their sophisticated monitoring equipment hadn't caught? As the procedure concluded successfully, the medical team stepped back to observe their tiny patient, now breathing easily with the help of gentle pressure support. The parents, who had been quickly summoned, pressed their hands against the NICU window, tears of gratitude streaming down their faces. "Your daughter is going to be fine," Michael assured them, stepping outside to explain the situation. "We caught the condition early, thanks to..." He paused, realizing how strange it would sound to credit a dog with their success. But the parents had already noticed Max, who had moved closer to them, offering a quiet, comforting presence. The mother knelt down, reaching out to touch him, and for the first time since he'd appeared at the hospital, Max allowed human contact. He gently pressed his head against her hand, while the father wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders. The scene struck Jessica deeply. This moment of connection between the mysterious dog who had saved their baby and the parents who might never have known how close they came to tragedy. She felt tears welling up in her eyes. But for once, they weren't tears of sadness or guilt. Later that night, Jessica found Michael in the doctor's lounge, staring into a cold cup of coffee. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a strange calm that matched the quiet uncertainty in the room. The events of the night had shaken both of them in different ways. "I've never seen anything like it." Michael finally broke the silence, his voice lacking its usual clinical detachment. "In all my years of practice, I've never..." He trailed off, unable to find the right words to describe what they'd witnessed. Jessica sat across from him, her nursing cap removed, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. "You know what the strange thing is," she said softly. "When Max was there, I wasn't afraid. For the first time since losing that baby last month, I felt like I could trust my instincts again." Michael looked up, studying her face. The haunted look that had shadowed her features these past weeks had softened. "You're a good nurse, Jessica. What happened wasn't your fault. Maybe that's what Max is trying to show us," she responded, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "That sometimes we need to look beyond our usual ways of seeing things." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Thompson, who entered the lounge with an unusual spring in his step, despite the late hour. "Well, you'll never believe this," he announced, "but the staff has started a petition. They want to make Max an official therapy dog for the pediatric ward." The ideas spread through the hospital like wildfire. By morning, nurses were setting up a small bed near the nursery entrance, complete with water bowl and blankets. The maintenance staff installed a special flap in one of the side doors, allowing Max to come and go as he needed. What amazed everyone most was how naturally Max adapted to his new role. He seemed to know exactly when and where he was needed. During busy times, he would position himself near the nursery window, his calm presence soothing anxious parents. During quiet moments, he would make rounds through the pediatric ward, bringing smiles to tired faces. Jessica found herself looking forward to her shifts again. Max's presence had somehow transformed the nursery from a place of anxiety to one of hope. She noticed how he would appear at her side during difficult moments, as if sensing when she needed support. "It's remarkable," Dr. Thompson commented one morning, watching Max comfort a crying infant with nothing more than his gentle presence. "The babies respond to him in a way I've never seen. Their vital signs actually improve when he's nearby." Even the hospital administration, initially skeptical about having a dog in the medical facility, couldn't deny the positive impact. Patient satisfaction scores in the pediatric ward had improved significantly, and staff morale was higher than it had been in months. Michael, despite his initial skepticism, found himself documenting Max's effects on patient outcomes. "We could be looking at a groundbreaking study in animal-assisted therapy," he admitted to Jessica during rounds. "The data is impressive." The transformation was most evident in Jessica. She began staying after her shifts to help organize a more formal therapy animal program for the hospital. Her experience with Max had sparked something new in her, a belief that healing could come in unexpected forms. One evening, as she was finishing her rounds, she found Max sitting in his usual spot by the nursery. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, giving his fur a golden glow. She knelt beside him, finally allowing herself to address the grief she'd been carrying. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered, running her hand through his fur. "You knew we needed help just as much as the babies did." Max turned his amber eyes to her, and in that moment, Jessica felt the last of her guilt begin to fade. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both look up. Michael stood there, his white coat draped over one arm, looking more relaxed than anyone could remember seeing him. "I just submitted the paperwork," he announced. "The hospital board has officially approved the therapy animal program." Over the following weeks, Max's influence spread beyond the nursery ward. His reputation grew throughout the hospital, and staff members from other departments would often find excuses to visit the pediatric floor. hoping to catch a glimpse of the remarkable dog who seemed to sense medical emergencies before they happened. The change in Jessica was particularly noteworthy. She began conducting informal training sessions for other nurses, sharing her observations about Max's behavior patterns and how they could be integrated into patient care. Her natural leadership abilities, long suppressed by grief and self-doubt, emerged as she helped develop protocols for the new animal therapy program. "It's not just about having animals present," she explained during one staff meeting while Max dozed at her feet. "It's about understanding the connection between emotional and physical healing. We've seen vital signs improve, recovery times decrease, and anxiety levels drop significantly in patients who interact with Max." Michael found himself increasingly drawn into the program's development. His scientific mind now focused on documenting and analyzing the benefits they were witnessing. He set up a research protocol to track patient outcomes, creating detailed reports that would later become the foundation for a broader study on animal-assisted therapy in neonatal care. "The data is remarkable," he shared with Jessica one afternoon, reviewing his notes. "Premature infants who have regular contact with Max show improved weight gain and more stable vital signs. Parents report feeling less stressed, which in turn appears to positively affect infant feeding and bonding." The hospital's success story began attracting attention from other medical facilities. Visitors from neighboring hospitals would come to observe their program, often leaving amazed by what they witnessed. Max seemed to take it all in stride, maintaining his quiet dignity as he made his rounds. One particularly memorable case involved a mother who had been resistant to kangaroo care with her premature twins. Her fear of hurting the fragile infants had created a barrier to essential skin-to-skin contact. Max, sensing her anxiety, positioned himself near her chair in the NICU, his steady presence providing silent support. "I don't know how to explain it," the mother later told Jessica, "but watching how gentle and careful he was made me feel braver. If a dog could show such tenderness, surely I could too." Within days, she was confidently holding her babies, and their condition began to improve rapidly. The success of the program inspired Jessica to reach out to local animal shelters. She organized a partnership that would help identify and train other potential therapy dogs. The initiative quickly gained support from hospital administration, who had seen firsthand the positive impact of Max's presence. "We're not just treating medical conditions anymore," Dr. Thompson observed during a board meeting. "We're healing people on multiple levels. Max has shown us that medicine isn't just about procedures and medications. It's about creating an environment where healing can happen naturally." Michael, once the department's biggest skeptic, found himself regularly consulting with Max during difficult cases. He would often find the dog waiting outside the rooms of patients who would later develop complications, learning to trust these silent warnings as much as his own medical instincts. "I can't explain it scientifically," he admitted to Jessica during one of their no-frequent coffee breaks, "but I've learned that sometimes not being able to explain something doesn't make it any less real." The hospital's annual fundraising gala took on a new theme that year, focusing on the innovative therapy program. Pictures of Max with various patients covered the walls, each telling a story of healing and hope. The event raised record amounts, ensuring the program's future growth and development. As Max's first year at the hospital approached, Jessica organized a special celebration. Staff members brought their families to meet the dog who had changed their workplace so profoundly. Children played in the hospital garden while their parents shared stories about Max's impact on their lives. The hospital's garden had been transformed for the community event. Colorful banners hung between the trees, and information booths about animal therapy lined the walkways. At the center of it all was Max, calmly accepting attention from the steady stream of visitors who came to meet the dog they'd heard so much about. Jessica stood at the podium, her hands slightly trembling as she prepared to address the gathered crowd. A year ago, She could hardly look at the nursery without feeling overwhelmed by grief. Now, she was about to speak publicly about the transformation that had taken place, not just in the hospital, but in her own life. When Max first appeared at our hospital, she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. We thought we were the ones helping him by giving him a home. What we didn't realize was that he was actually here to help us. To help me. She paused, meeting the eyes of parents whose babies Max had helped save. As healthcare professionals, we're trained to rely on technology, on measurable data, on proven protocols. But Max taught us something different. He showed us that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about connection, intuition, and sometimes just being present with someone in their moment of need. The crowd listened intently as Jessica shared stories from the past year, the countless nights Max had alerted them to struggling infants, the worried parents he had comforted, the staff members whose emotional burdens he had helped ease. Each story resonated with the audience, many of whom had their own experiences with a remarkable dog. Michael then took the stage, his usual professional demeanor softened by genuine emotion. A year ago, if you had told me I would be standing here talking about the medical benefits of having a dog in our hospital, I would have questioned your scientific judgment, he admitted, drawing knowing chuckles from the crowd. But what Max has shown us can't be ignored, even by the most skeptical mind. We've documented decreased recovery times, improved patient outcomes, and significantly reduced stress levels among both patients and staff. More importantly, we've seen a fundamental change in how we approach patient care. He went on to present the preliminary findings of his research, showing graphs and statistics that demonstrated the measurable impact of Max's presence. But it was when he put aside his notes and spoke from the heart that he truly captured the audience's attention. I've spent my career believing that good medicine was about maintaining professional distance, about not getting emotionally involved. Max taught me that there's another way, that compassion and clinical excellence aren't mutually exclusive, they're complementary. The audience broke into spontaneous applause as Michael gestured toward Max, who sat attentively beside Jessica. The dog's calm demeanor seemed to embody everything they were celebrating, the perfect balance of professionalism and warmth, of science and intuition. Local media covered the event, interviewing parents whose babies had been saved thanks to Max's inexplicable ability to detect problems before they became critical. Children who had recovered in the pediatric ward shared stories about the dog who had made their hospital stay less frightening. The event also served as the official launch of the hospital's expanded animal therapy program. Jessica proudly introduced 3 new therapy dogs who had completed training and would be joining different departments. While none could replicate Max's unusual abilities, each brought their own special energy to the healing environment. As the celebration continued, Jessica noticed Michael standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching Max interact with a group of children. She joined him, recognizing the thoughtful expression on his face, quite different from the skeptic who wanted to throw him out of the nursery that first night. She teased gently. Michael smiled, shaking his head. I was so sure I had everything figured out, that there was a rational explanation for everything. Now, he gestured toward Max, who was now gently nuzzling a former patient in a wheelchair. I realize there's so much we don't understand about healing. The celebration continued into the evening, with families sharing stories and children taking turns petting Max. The success of the event had exceeded everyone's expectations, drawing attention from medical professionals across the city. The garden lights twinkled as the sun began to set, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Jessica and Michael found themselves standing near the refreshment table, watching as Max made his rounds among the guests. Their professional relationship had evolved over the past year, softened by shared experiences and mutual respect. I never properly thanked you, Jessica said quietly, for supporting the program, even when it went against everything you believed in. Michael turned to her, his expression thoughtful. You know what? I've learned this past year. Sometimes the best things in life happen when we let go of our preconceptions. He paused, watching as Max gently guided a toddler back toward her parents. And sometimes the best teachers aren't the ones with medical degrees. Their moment was interrupted by an unexpected commotion near the garden entrance. A middle-aged man had just arrived, and his presence was causing a stir among the guests. He stood frozen at the gate, his eyes fixed on Max with an intensity that made several people step back. "That's him," the man whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "That's Ghost." Max's head snapped up at the word, his ears perking forward in recognition. The dog's reaction was unlike anything the hospital staff had ever seen from him before. "Ghost," Jessica repeated, moving protectively closer to Max. "His name is Max." The man shook his head, pulling out his phone and quickly scrolling through photos. "No, this is Ghost. He's a certified therapy dog from the Pacific Coast Animal Rescue Organization. He disappeared during a rescue operation last year during a major storm." The revelation sent murmurs through the crowd. Parents drew closer, protective of the dog who had watched over their children. Staff members exchanged worried glances, understanding the implications of what they were hearing. Michael stepped forward, his professional demeanor taking over. "Sir, I'm Dr. Michael Roberts, head of pediatrics. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere private." But Max, or Ghost, had other ideas. He approached the stranger slowly, his tail beginning to wag in a way none of them had seen before. When he reached the man, he pressed his head against his hand in a gesture of clear recognition. The man knelt down, tears forming in his eyes as he ran his hands over the dog's fur. "I've been searching for you for so long, boy. We all thought we'd lost you in that storm." Jessica felt her heart constricting. She watched as Max, the dog who had helped her heal, who had saved countless babies, who had transformed their entire hospital, showed obvious signs of knowing this stranger. The crowd had grown silent, the celebratory atmosphere replaced by a tension that was almost palpable. Parents held their children closer, some wiping away tears as they realized what this might mean for their beloved hospital guardian. Michael's hand found Jessica's shoulder, offering silent support as they watched the reunion unfold. "He has documentation," he said quietly. "Photos, medical records, training certificates. He's been searching for over a year." The man looked up at them, seeming to realize the impact of his appearance. "I'm Dr. James Cooper," he introduced himself, standing while keeping one hand on the dog's head. "I run the animal therapy program at Central Valley Children's Hospital. Ghost is our most gifted therapy dog. He has an almost supernatural ability to sense medical emergencies before they happen." The description hit home with everyone present. It explained so much about their mysterious guardian, his training, his intuition, his gentle way with patients. But understanding didn't make the situation any easier to accept. The news of Max's, or Ghost's, true identity spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members who couldn't attend the celebration received urgent texts and calls, and by morning, the entire hospital was buzzing with anxiety about their beloved therapy dog's fate. Jessica found herself in an early morning emergency meeting with hospital administration, Michael, and Dr. Cooper. The conference room felt unusually small and tense as they discussed the situation. Ghost was part of a pioneering program in medical alert dogs. Dr. Cooper explained, spreading out documentation on the table. "He's one of only a handful of dogs worldwide who have demonstrated this level of medical intuition. We were working with him in disaster response training when the storm hit. He got separated from his handler during an evacuation. The papers before them told the story: certificates, training records, medical studies, and news articles about Ghost's remarkable abilities. There were even scientific papers documenting his extraordinary capacity to detect medical emergencies before conventional monitoring equipment. We searched for months," Dr. Cooper continued, his voice thick with emotion. "We never stopped looking. When I saw the news coverage of your celebration, I recognized him immediately." Jessica sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She thought about all the nights Max had been there for her, how he had helped her rebuild her confidence after losing that baby. The thought of losing him now felt like another kind of grief. Our legal department is reviewing the situation, the hospital administrator announced, but preliminary findings indicate that Dr. Cooper has clear proof of ownership. We may need to prepare for Ghost's return to Central Valley. The words hit like a physical blow. Michael, noticing Jessica's distress, spoke up. What about the patients? We have infants and children who depend on him. Parents who bring their babies here specifically because of his presence. A wave of supportive murmurs rose from the staff members present. One of the senior nurses stood up. We've built our entire therapy program around him. The parents trust him. The babies respond to him. He's saved lives here. Dr. Cooper listened to their concerns with genuine sympathy. I understand completely, he said. We felt the same way at Central Valley. The children there still ask about him. Some of them haven't bonded with any other therapy dog since he disappeared. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent knock. A nurse burst in, slightly out of breath. I'm sorry, but you need to see this, she said, gesturing for them to follow. They hurried to the hospital entrance, where a crowd had gathered. Parents whose children had been helped by Max were arriving, having heard the news through social media. They carried signs and photos, some telling stories to local reporters who had shown up to cover the developing story. He saved my baby, one mother told a news camera, tears streaming down her face. The doctors said if he hadn't alerted them when he did, my Sophie wouldn't be here today. He sat with my son through every chemotherapy session, another parent added. Tommy wouldn't eat unless Max was there. We can't lose him. The crowd continued to grow as more families arrived, their presence a testament to the impact one dog had made on countless lives. Max, or Ghost, sat calmly in the midst of it all, seemingly aware of the turmoil his identity had caused. Jessica watched the scene unfold, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She understood Dr. Cooper's right to reclaim his lost companion, but she also felt the weight of all these families' needs. The dog had become more than just a therapy animal. He was a symbol of hope, a guardian angel in fur. There has to be a solution, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. There has to be a way to make this right for everyone. Michael, standing beside her, nodded slowly. Maybe there is, he said thoughtfully, watching as Dr. Cooper interacted with some of the parents. But first, we need to understand exactly what's best for him. Late that evening, Jessica gathered her courage and approached Dr. Cooper, who was sitting alone in the hospital garden, watching Max Ghost interact with a group of evening shift nurses. Can we talk? She asked, settling beside him on the bench. I need to understand something about him, about Ghost. Dr. Cooper nodded, his eyes never leaving the dog. He was always special, he began. Even during training, we knew there was something different about him. His ability to sense medical emergencies isn't just training, it's something innate. As they talked, Michael approached with a proposal he'd been working on all day. Dr. Cooper, he said, holding out a folder, I think I might have a solution that could benefit everyone. Inside the folder was a detailed plan for a joint program between the two hospitals. The proposal suggested sharing Ghost's time between both facilities, using his unique abilities to help establish similar programs in other hospitals, and conducting formal research into his extraordinary capabilities. We could learn so much more by working together, Michael explained. Your experience with his training, combined with our documentation of his work here, we could develop protocols that would help hospitals everywhere better integrate therapy animals into critical care. Before Dr. Cooper could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion from the nursery. Ghost had suddenly risen and was heading there with purpose, his familiar alert behavior that they'd come to trust implicitly. All three doctors followed quickly, professional instincts taking over. Inside the nursery, they found a baby showing early signs of distress. Signs so subtle they wouldn't have been caught for hours without Ghost's warning. As they worked together to stabilize the infant, doctor. Cooper watched in amazement. "He's even better than before," he murmured, observing how Ghost seamlessly integrated with the medical team's response. "You've given him something here, a purpose that goes beyond his training." After the situation was resolved, Dr. Cooper sat heavily in a nearby chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said slowly, "when I first realized he was here, I thought only about bringing him home. But watching him work just now," he paused, looking at Ghost, who had returned to his usual spot near the nursery window. "Maybe home isn't just one place anymore." The solution, when it finally came together, was both unexpected and perfect. Ghost would split his time between both hospitals, spending 2 weeks at each facility. During transitions, he would help train other therapy dogs, sharing his unique abilities with a new generation of medical support animals. More importantly, the two hospitals would collaborate on a groundbreaking study of animal-assisted medical alert systems, with Ghost as their primary subject. The research would help develop protocols for identifying and training other dogs with similar potential. "He chose both of us," Jessica realized, watching as Ghost comfortable settled into his new routine. He knew exactly where he was needed and when. The story of the dog with 2 names and 2 homes made headlines across the country. Other hospitals began reaching out, eager to learn from their experience and establish their own therapy animal programs. For Jessica, the resolution brought unexpected peace. She no longer had to fear losing her 4-legged guardian entirely, and she gained something else, a broader purpose in helping expand the program to reach more patients and families in need. Michael found himself regularly traveling between the 2 hospitals, coordinating research and sharing findings. His initial skepticism had transformed into passionate advocacy for the role of animal therapy in modern medicine. On Ghost's last evening, before his first transition to Central Valley, Jessica found him in his usual spot by the nursery. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You knew we all needed healing, patients, staff, even Dr. Cooper, and you found a way to help us all." Ghost pressed his head against her hand, his eyes wise and gentle. In that moment, Jessica understood that sometimes the greatest miracles come not from choosing between 2 goods, but from finding a way to embrace them both. As Ghost left with Dr. Cooper the next morning, hospital staff lined the halls to say goodbye. Not forever, but just for now. They watched him walk out with the same dignity and purpose with which he'd first appeared, knowing he would return in 2 weeks' time to continue his unique mission of healing. The legacy of the dog with 2 names would continue to grow, touching countless lives and transforming the way hospitals approached healing. But for those who knew him best, he would always be their guardian angel, the mysterious visitor who had taught for them that sometimes the most powerful medicine comes with 4 paws and an endless capacity for love.